NBA legend Dennis Rodman was once on a cruise with his girlfriend when they wanted to try something different in bed. She suggested for Dennis to run and jump inside of her while she was laying down unclothed. This resulted in Dennis shattering his member and pouring blood all over the bed. It was the first of 3 times that he would break his pecker, since once you break it the first time, it becomes way easier to break again. Gouverneur Morris was an important founding father of the United States who wrote the introduction to the Constitution. But he died at the age of 64 after attempting to clear a urinary tract blockage using a whalebone as a catheter. While the practice of marrying your cousin is typically seen as something only done by British royalty or Alabama rednecks, up until the 1900s, virtually no one married complete strangers like we do today. In fact, 80% of all marriages throughout history have been between second cousins or closer. Wonder Woman was created by a polyamorous male kinkster who was married to 2 bisexual women. The character was originally made to represent an overtly kinky sex symbol for women, and was nearly cancelled from the start because of how explicitly she was being depicted. The throuple was also heavily into bondage, which supposedly inspired Wonder Woman's rope. Edgar Allan Poe married his first cousin Virginia when she was 13 years old and he was 27. The pair first met when Virginia was only 7 while Edgar was 21. Former Vice President Nelson Rockefeller suffered a heart attack and died while having intercourse with his 25-year-old assistant. He was 70 years old at the time. Most famous for his 6 different marriages, King Henry VIII hired 4 men to regularly check his feces, monitor his bowel movements, and wipe his bottom. They were known as the grooms of the King's Stool, and all of them were eventually knighted. Future President JFK was dating Miss Denmark Inga Arvid in the 1940s. The FBI once bugged their room because they thought she was a Nazi spy. Turns out they didn't hear much conversation, but instead just a lot of spicy time. But that's not the crazy part. The reason why the FBI thought Inga was a Nazi spy was because she was Hitler's companion during the 1936 Olympics, and he once described her as the perfect example of Nordic beauty. This means that Hitler and JFK may very well have been Eskimo bros. The first confirmed minor to be executed in the United States was 16-year-old Thomas Granger in 1642, who was sentenced to death for intercourse involving several animals, including a mare, a cow, 2 goats, multiple sheep, 2 calves, and a turkey. Authorities consulted with his parents prior to the execution, and they thought that he would never be able to live this down. All parties agreed it would be best to simply execute him and wash their hands of the whole situation. In 2012, Donna Summer died from lung cancer at the age of 63, even though she wasn't a smoker. The singer believed it was caused by inhaling the toxic fumes from the Twin Towers after they fell on 9/11. Since the dust filled the air around Ground Zero for several months afterwards, and Summer lived nearby. In fact, around 6,400 people have since died from 9/11 related illnesses, more than double the amount that died on the actual day of the attacks. The Dani tribe in Indonesia is known to cut off parts of their fingers after the death of a loved one. In 1928, Alfred Lowenstein, the 3rd richest man in the world at the time, completely disappeared from his private jet in the middle of a flight. After Alfred took too long to use the bathroom, his secretary went in to check on him, but the bathroom was empty and the exit door connected to it was wide open. There have been many theories put forth, but Alfred most likely opened the wrong door by accident and plunged thousands of feet to his death. In 1977, 20-year-old Oregon woman Colleen Stan was hitchhiking to her friend's birthday party when she was kidnapped by Cameron and Janice Hooker, trusting them because they had an infant daughter in their car. Long before this, the couple agreed that husband Cameron could capture a slave to tie up for his pleasure, and he had decided on Colleen. For the next 7 years, Colleen was repeatedly tortured and kept locked in a tiny wooden coffin under the couple's bed for up to 23 hours a day. Cameron forced her to sign her life away to slavery via contract, and convinced her that she was being watched by a powerful organization called the Company, which he claimed would painfully torture her and her family if she ever tried to escape. One day, 4 years after being kidnapped, Colleen was allowed to visit her family by herself, but she didn't reveal her situation to them due to her fear of the consequences. Her family simply thought she was involved in a cult, so they didn't want to pressure her to come home, fearing that she would stay away forever. The very next day, Colleen returned for a second visit with Cameron posing as her boyfriend, but again, nothing was done. 3 years later, Cameron wanted Colleen to become his second wife, which was a turning point for his wife Janice. In August of 1984, Janice secretly informed Colleen that they weren't part of the company, and Colleen managed to escape soon afterwards. In the months that followed, Colleen didn't contact the police but continued to call Cameron routinely to give him a chance to reform. But 3 months later, Janice reported her husband to police and he received 100+ years in prison. Just 2 years after filming Ferris Bueller, Matthew Broderick killed 2 women while driving on the wrong side of the road in Ireland. He said he had no recollection of the incident and got off with a $175 fine. A male gorilla named Michael learned sign language and once used it to describe his mother being shot and killed by poachers. 2 years ago, a distress message was found in a can of sardines saying, "We are Sudanese laborers enslaved by this company." An investigation was opened by Egyptian authorities, but nothing ever came of it. Genghis Khan would marry off one of his daughters to the king of an allied nation and then assign his new son-in-law to military duty. As Khan expected, most of these son-in-laws would die in combat, giving his daughters complete control over these nations. Here are some morbidly wholesome facts about Robin Williams. When Sharon Osbourne was sick in bed with cancer and giving up, Ozzy asked Robin Williams to come visit. Robin randomly hopped in her sick bed, and her family instantly went from crying to laughing hysterically. Robin cheered her up so much that she went back to chemo the very next day. When Christopher Reeve was left paralyzed after a horse riding accident, Robin was one of the first people to visit him in the hospital. He came in dressed as a doctor and told Reeve he was there to give him a rectal exam, causing him to laugh for the first time in weeks. Robin had a clause in his contract that required at least 10 homeless people to be hired in every movie he acted in. Throughout his career, he helped over 1,500 homeless people get jobs. When Robin Williams first met Coco the gorilla in 2001, he made her smile for the first time in 6 months. When Robin died suddenly in 2014, Coco overheard the news and said the word cry in sign language. Morbidly Wholesome Facts, Part 63. Keanu Reeves' sister Kim was diagnosed with the deadly blood cancer leukemia in 1991. In response, he sold his home to move closer to her, cleaned her house, cooked her meals, and provided all of her necessary medications. Once she recovered, Keanu started a private charity to fund cancer research in children's hospitals. In 2009, he was interviewed saying, "I don't like to attach my name to it, I just let the foundation do what it does." Frank Sinatra died the night of Seinfeld's finale, and his ambulance made it to the hospital in record time since there was no traffic due to everyone watching the show. Hans Scharf, the most successful Nazi interrogator in World War II, never physically harmed an enemy soldier. Instead, he treated them with respect and kindness, taking them for walks, letting them visit their captured comrades in the hospital, and even letting captured pilots go on test flights. His methods were very successful since virtually everyone ended up talking. A sheep-herding dog named Casper faced off against 11 threatening coyotes and killed 8 of them on the farm. He then went missing for 2 days, most likely to track the remaining coyotes and finish the job. His vet said he's incredibly lucky to be alive, while his owner agreed to let him retire. During World War II, a German pilot spotted an American pilot's crippled plane in the sky. He noticed that the gunner was dead, the crew was injured, and that they didn't pose any threat. So instead of destroying the plane, he led it to safety and spared the men's lives. 40 years later, the 2 pilots reunited and became fishing buddies. Army soldier Jacob Miller was shot in the forehead during the Civil War. Left for dead, he somehow regained consciousness a few hours later and went on to live for another 54 years. Before bombs, pilots dropped these steel arrows over the enemy in the early days of aerial warfare. They were usually dropped on enemy trenches where they would deal an entire line of damage. Here's a photo of anti-war demonstrators protesting outside the 1968 DNC in Chicago. Shirtless protester Frank Plata was later drafted by the U.S. Army and killed in the Vietnam War. Here's a clip of Admiral Jeremiah Denton blinking the word torture in Morse code while being held captive in the Vietnam War. He was being filmed for propaganda, but U.S. naval intelligence was able to decipher his message.